the topic is decentralized margin lending and borrowing. We have Kyle Kistner here from bZx Protocol with us. Kyle, are you there?
Hi, Michelle. How's it going?
Good, good. Thank you for calling in.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So let's get started. I'm really excited about this topic, of course, because it's DeFi. Let's begin with telling us a little bit about you. What is your story?
Yeah, so my name's Kyle J. Kistner. I'm 29 years old. I have a master's degree in computational and molecular biology. During undergraduate, I worked as a tutor, helping economic majors with intermediate macroeconomics. During graduate school, I worked in a laboratory conducting vaccine research with a focus on Streptococcus pyogenes, the bacteria that causes strep throat.
Sounds awesome. I also have a little bit of biology background, so love that. When do you first become aware of blockchain and the possibilities it could bring to the world?
Yeah, so I started getting interested in the blockchain space in 2011 while I was an undergraduate. I found the anti-authoritarian aesthetic of decentralization alluring, and I kept following it throughout my education. When the concept of colored coins like Namecoin and Peercoin was first introduced to me, it blew my mind that we could do things besides simply transferring value on a ledger. So then I encountered the Ethereum white paper, which was promising to be this single general solution that could encompass everything the colored coins could do and more, and I was hooked. When I got out of school, I spent my time reading every white paper I could and talking with different founders, and that's how my blockchain journey really started.
So let's jump into bZx. What is bZx protocol?
So yeah, it's a generic protocol for peer-to-peer borrowing and lending. And one of the draws of it is that it's decentralized. So right now it focuses on over-collateralized loans and margin trading of digital assets as the two initial use cases, but really it's a generic protocol for debt. The guiding light for the project is that we are decentralization maximalists. There's this, idea that we have that, we could be hit by a meteor and the project and the software will live on the blockchain indefinitely and unstoppably. And that's something that really delights us. We're very much believers in the original ethos of the space, whereas, there's a lot of projects that, came out a little bit later that are focused more away from decentralization as an end to itself.
Let's talk a little bit about decentralization because I think it's important to define it a little bit because there's centralization and decentralization. What does it mean in general, right? And what does it mean in your space?
Yeah, so what decentralization really means is that there's not a single point of failure, that if it goes down, then everything else goes with it. So, if say a front end is centralized and, they have the only way of interacting with the protocol and that front end goes down, then that's a point of centralization. That means that, if that website gets shut down, then everybody's money is gone, the project is over. So, depending on which project you're talking about, there are different constituent parts to each protocol that could be centralized or decentralized. With a margin lending platform, the big ones are price feeds and ways to source margin call liquidity and initiate margin calls. Those are in the front end as well. Those are the big components that you need to look at and say, okay, can everybody do this? Is it permissionless? What happens if the project goes away? So when we think about, what happens if the project goes away, is this part of it still functioning or is it not still functioning? That can give us a lot of insight into whether or not it's decentralized or centralized.
But decentralization is not dependent on the team. So if no one is there, the project is still running. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's not necessarily the case that everything has to be centralized to the team. So if you have a price feed that comes from, say, Coinbase's API, then that's centralized to Coinbase. And if something happens to Coinbase, then the feed is gone and the project might not work anymore. So it's really about whether or not everybody can participate. That's kind of the key to decentralization. Something is maximally decentralized when everyone can participate and they don't need permission to do it.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's not entity dependent. Um, so
Exactly.
when did you come up with the idea?
So the idea started forming around the summer of 2017. I had been playing around with these ideas for peer-to-peer, for just regular peer-to-peer lending businesses, and kind of, getting my head around the idea of what goes into credit scores. But I was also very deep into the blockchain space. So I had been looking at stuff like Upstart, which, might look at your education and try to figure out ways to bootstrap predicting people's credit. I was looking at things like Lending Club, trying to figure out ways to basically bootstrap credit. And I had just been thinking a lot about lending. But while I was, inside the blockchain space, I also had two particularly formative experiences. One was watching the high-profile Bitfinex hack, which I had a friend who had been lending out money there, and he lost a substantial amount of his holdings, thereby, really putting a damper on his effective yield. And I thought it was really cool because Bitfinex often had interest rates of like 40% APR. And that was just insane. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool if you could get these kind of APRs, but you didn't have to worry about Bitfinex getting hacked or some exchange getting hacked? And there had been so many high-profile exchange hacks, starting with Mt. Gox. And the other thing that was really formative was reading the bZx white paper. This was kind of like an aha moment for me. As I read the white paper, I felt like they had considered each issue very carefully, tried to consider scalability and all of the different aspects that go into an exchange, like collisions and front running. And it made me really excited. And it also made me feel like there was an elegant way to solve the issue of earning interest on margin while minimizing custodial risk. So it was sort of from this that the idea, was first catalyzed. And I started talking to different founders of projects, Stani Kulichov from Eastland, and I'd kind of started batting around this idea with him, and I originally called it Banker, and it was intended to be built on Bankor's protocol. And it just started evolving from there. And then I, started talking to who is now my co-founder, Tom Bean, about it. And he had a very long history as a software engineer, and he was very excited about it. He was like, "Hey, where'd you get this from?" And I was like, "No, it's just been working on it, and just kind of, it's been percolating." And he wanted to be part of it, and we started iterating on it and kind of refining the idea and starting to build it out.
Let's talk a little bit about your vision. What is your vision that is larger than the product itself right now? And how are you going to go and build out that vision?
Yeah, so I think that being in decentralized finance, we have to hope that we're taking part in a large-scale restructuring of how finance is done, and not just making cryptocurrency trading slightly more efficient than Coinbase. Right now, the ecosystem...
Sorry. I'm just laughing because I remember, so in 2015 or so, I was working on a project that involves blockchain and payments, and my co-founder wanted to talk to me about it, and first thing I did was printed out the current infrastructure and cross out the clearinghouse. And and when we created our deck, I thought we were too early, right? And that deck has the feature or like a glimpse of what that future could be of fintech, right? So when you're talking about the larger vision of what it would be, it just kind of remind me of that, right? And it is restructuring because it's very different. And I think a lot of the old players may not like that, even though they're basically filing a lot of patents on it.
Yeah, and I think what we're doing is potentially one of the most threatening things for the like currently entrenched players. And there's a reason for that I think, not a lot of people realize. So like say I wanted so, one thing we're trying to do is like say in the bigger picture is let you short or leverage, and particularly this is important, lend Apple, Microsoft, Netflix, and other securities.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, most traditional brokers won't let you lend your securities.
Mm-hmm.
They're spiriting off your assets to short sellers and leverage speculators, and they're keeping the profit. So there are a few venues like Interactive Brokers that will let you engage in security lendings as just like a normal retail investor. But if you check the fine print, and like Interactive Brokers is the only place, and I looked for quite a long time, is the only place I know of that will let you as retail engage in securities lending. If you read that fine print, they keep fully half of the interest that you own and take that as their own profit. So like the amount that the current brokers are earning on security lending, and by excluding people from the market, and in the rare case where people are included, taking so much of that is actually pretty insane. And so a project like ours could really change the game on that and take all of that money that the current brokers are making and kind of bring it back to the people.
Sounds awesome. Let's discuss a little bit about the company and the team. So how big is your team, and how do you find them, and are you guys able to collaborate and work together to build this vision?
Yeah, so our team is fully remote. We have 3 developers in Europe, 1 in India. We have Tom and me. We're here in Atlanta. Our marketers in LA. We have a designer in Europe, 1 in San Francisco. So we have a very distributed team, and we find it actually pretty easy to collaborate. We're all very flexible, and we don't keep very normal hours, so we'll be sort of on call at any time to collaborate. And we mostly do it online via Slack, Telegram, WhatsApp, Google Hangouts, and we, and we find that our development moves pretty quickly. We have a pretty eclectic mix of people. I'd say like we're more balanced towards developers, and for most of our project's life, we were almost all developers.
Mm-hmm.
But recently we brought on, well, except for the designers, but recently we brought on a marketer, and he is actually the maker at one of the best resources for learning about decentralized finance. It's called DeFi Prime.
Mm-hmm.
I really recommend the site. It has a list of pretty much every DeFi project that's like at least somewhat legitimate, and lots of educational resources, interviews, and all of that. So, Nick is a really great guy. He does a great job as a marketer, and I can't recommend his DeFi Prime site enough if you're kind of like interested in getting your feet wet in the ecosystem.
That's really awesome. I also believe that it's kind of important to have marketing, sales, and business people as much as developers, because I think they should run a little bit more parallel to have that kind of traction and also have feedback for the product as well. And who is your target audience? Like, who is going to use this?
Well, right now, as the industry is still very much developing the core infrastructure that will let like the average person purchase securities and things like that. Our core audience are people who are already crypto native. So like the people who can best use. So I break it up into like 3 different main demographics, or maybe 4. So there's people who just want to lend their crypto out and earn interest. So that's like a pretty broad appeal to the average cryptocurrency holder. There's people who are, gamblers who have strong opinions about the direction of the market, and they might margin trade. There are people who are like ICOs or either like all in on crypto who have bills to pay but don't want to sell their crypto, and they just want to get liquidity for like either their ETH holdings or their current ERC20 holdings. And then there's also people who are like, again, like crypto natives, but who like want to like use the lending as a way of like engaging in tax arbitrage. So they get liquidity for their holdings and then they sell their holdings later when they can pay like long-term capital gains taxes on it.
That sounds awesome. Do you guys have competitor?
Yeah. So when we first started, my co-founder, he's like, how is nobody doing this yet? And I said, I don't know, industry's pretty young. I think it was just possible recently that the tech stack hasn't even really been in place. Like when we started building, we needed a source for decentralized price feeds. And we looked around, and we needed something that was general, that would support a whole lot of assets, not just like ETH DAI or something like that. And what we found was that there was nothing like that. But we stumbled upon a project called Kyber Network. And I had been following it since, they released their white paper. And, one of the things they advertised was, hey, you can use our trading API that's on chain as a secure price feed. And we're like, great, we needed the price chains to be on chain and we needed them to be secure. And so we, started building on them. And when we did, they still were not on mainnet. They were still a white paper. And we started building with the intention of building on them. And, when we told people that, they were like, yeah, there's not really that much liquidity there. And like, are you sure about that? And we were like, this is the only way that we can see to actually make this work. And even as it progressed, like last year, people were like, yeah, I don't know, like the liquidity in the DEX ecosystem is just not very good. I just don't think this will work. But as this year has gone on and we've actually released our products, the DEX ecosystem has picked up so much that by the time we were ready, it was also ready.
That's a lot of faith, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's no ecosystem, and we're waiting for another project to build it. So we're gonna assume that they're gonna be well, and we're gonna build on it, and it works out perfectly.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of faith, and we're happy to see too that Kyber was the first with the decentralized price feed. And it was just like a really clever mechanism of all of these reserves competing for the best price. And we really loved the way that they had structured it. But there's new on-chain price feeds that will be secure coming online. And two we're really excited about is like Uniswap version 2.0, which should be dropping like probably in a month or two. I don't know if that's like a public date because they don't want to miss it and be on the hook for that. But that's the rumor. And then the other is Balancer, which is like just a super interesting project that kind of combines the best of like set protocol with like baskets, like portfolio baskets, along with kind of the automated market maker model of Uniswap. So it's almost like a generalized Uniswap that also has like the function of basket protocol. So it's a really heady project that we're super excited about, and we think is going to also bring a strong decentralized price feed to the table.
We spoke a little about target audience, and we spoke a little bit about your team. I wanted to ask you about your community. Just like any projects involving token, communities is really important. How do you guys grow your community, and where is it today?
So, initially we were not very focused on growing the community. We were just sort of heads down working on the product and trying to figure out product market fit. And we didn't have a marketer or anything like that. We were just like developers and technologists trying to make something that worked. And then once we released our product, our first product, Fulcrum, then we started thinking, okay, how do we get a marketer? How do we raise awareness? And that's when we brought on Nick, and we started trying to create content that was of general use and interest to the community. Create standards by which we could analyze and understand our little space of the industry. So I wrote this one article called "How Decentralized is DeFi: A Framework for classifying decentralized lending protocols." And this was like very large for us in terms of getting recognition and people learning about us. We got contacted by people like Citibank Ventures and like a whole bunch of different research analysts started putting it in their report, and Binance, when they wrote their DeFi report, they cribbed a lot of it from that article and cited it. And I talked to other founders, and they were like, hey, I passed this article around like our whole office and had everybody read it.
I need to read it.
It was really.
I need to read it now.
And it was great to see that. And then I wrote another one that was kind of like took stock of like the entire DAI ecosystem and all the different derivatives being built on DAI. Like, so many people weren't aware of just all the cool projects being built. And I'll just give some examples, like GDAI. It uses our iDAI along with gas station network, so that you hold GDAI and it earns interest while you hold it, but it also doesn't need to be held with ETH in your wallet. So it'll actually pay the gas fees for transferring it using DAI via the gas station network, so that you can have a wallet that only holds GDAI and you could send it to somebody. And that's something like you can't really do with anything else, because normally if you have say DAI in your wallet and you want to send it to someone, you also need ETH in your wallet in order to pay the transaction fees. So that was one that we thought was really cool. There's other ones like DDAI that's kind of combining GDAI and with RDAI, which lets you separate the interest from the token itself. And then they're even making it almost like a more generalized framework where you can actually create these complex programmatic recipes and portfolios, and kind of when you separate that interest, you can almost run it through a computer program that has it split it up in these really interesting complex ways. And so, and including, paying for your gas and all that. So there was this whole list of different derivatives of DAI that people weren't aware of. And, Vitalik Buterin retweeted it, and just all these people. And it was really great to see that, people are really learning from this article, and they're like, wow, I had no idea that there's so much going on with DAI. And so that's a lot of how we are trying to approach, getting noticed and getting our product out there. One of the, a few of the varieties of DAI that we talked about were built on us or built by us. So, we kind of do some general education, and, that happens to include things that we're doing. That's sort of our area. And then, we also work with people and just, try to, work with other teams to kind of promote their content and all of that, and just kind of working together as a community to get the word out there. But we have found just offering something that people really want has been really great. So we almost have a little bit of a branding problem in that, our company is bZx, but our first product was Fulcrum. And when we go around to conferences, people are like, hey, who are you? And we're like, we're bZx. And they're like, so what do you do? And I'm like, have you heard of Fulcrum? And they're like, oh, we love Fulcrum. Yeah, we use Fulcrum. And so, the fact that our Fulcrum brand name is just completely taken off past our underlying protocol name is very interesting, but really goes to show that, doing marketing is great, but actually having a product that people really like and listening to them and putting in the features that they want, nothing is better than that.
That sounds really awesome. I wanted to ask you a very simple question for the audience. What is gas?
Yeah. So, so like gas is the currency that you use to pay the miners on the Ethereum network. So the miners go and they include transactions in the chain. They have to solve this puzzle and using their graphics card or an ASIC, and so they solve the puzzle and they present, the list of transactions that they believe belongs in the next block, and you pay them with gas. Now, gas really is you get gas via ETH. So if you wanted to oversimplify, and I know some people come and be like, no, don't tell them this. ETH is gas, but if you get down in the weeds with the protocol folks, they'll say no, it's slightly different. But from like a 2,000-foot perspective of just like the average user, when you buy ETH, that's the coin that's minted when people mine Ethereum. That is what you pay the miners with.
Got it. Okay. Awesome. I wanted to talk about some of your products and
Yeah.
and
Sure.
what they do. Like, what are their features?
Sure. So our first product we came out with was Fulcrum, which lets you say you want to earn interest on your coins, on your DAI, on your USDC, on your ETH. You go to Fulcrum, you hit lend, you say how much you want to lend, and you send the transaction, and boom, you'll start seeing it earn interest right away. There's a little counter that goes up in real time. It's really fun to watch it go up, by the way. And then if you're like a trader and you're like, oh, I think ETH is going to go up a lot. I want to, make a lot of money on ETH going up, or I think ETH is going to go down a lot. You hit, 4 times long or 4 times short, depending on what you think is happening with the market. You accept, and you get in just by buying a token. So we actually tokenize the positions, which we think is really exciting. Like, they're perpetual, they're CFTC compliant, they roll over internally every 28 days to comply with these screwy CFTC regulations. But from the end user's perspective, you hold it, and it tracks the market either 2, 3, 4 times what the market is doing. And our lending pools are also tokenized as well. So you can lend it, and then you could send it to cold storage. You could, package it up with other products. If you're a developer, you can use it as collateral. And then our new product we just came out with pretty recently is called Torque, and Torque lets you borrow at fixed rates for indefinite terms. That doesn't mean infinitely. It means indefinite. Like, you don't know how much it's going to, like how long it's going to be. At least 3 months. We've not had any loans expire at this point. So this kind of brings the best of both worlds for people who want to borrow and want to know how much they're going to be paying to borrow. And so you can just send your ETH to dai.tokenloan.eth, and boom, you'll be in a loan. Or you can use our interface. You can use your ERC20s as collateral. You can use your ETH as collateral, and you can get DAI, you can get ETH, and borrow against your collateral in that way. So we're really excited about the ENS system that we created, where you can just send it to dai.tokenloan.eth, and if you want to top it up, you send some ETH to topup.dai.tokenloan.eth. We've created this human readable system where you can just interact with the blockchain directly from any wallet using just human readable domains, and it's almost like a command line for DeFi. And that was something we kind of innovated and made as a design pattern. Nobody had figured out how you could get around needing to call the approve function on the ERC20 contracts to allow this. But we did, and now people can use it just that easily. So we're really excited and proud of what we did on that front.
Wow. That's very exciting. That's a lot of products as well. It sounds like you guys have been building.
Yep, we're building a third one too now. It's under development.
Yeah. Let's not talk about that because I don't want anyone to happy what you guys are doing. In terms of general perspective on future development of your protocol, what are you guys focusing on?
Yeah, so in terms of like the existing products, we're really focusing on Fulcrum right now, kind of like liquidity aggregation to make slippage lower, just some, quality of life improvements, like better understanding of like your order history and the life cycle of your positions, unit of account abstraction. So, just automatically selecting which unit of account like DAI or USDC to use based on what has the lowest slippage, what will have you paying the least interest rates, and taking all of that into account. And then, as mentioned, we're building another thing that is mostly geared towards addressing like the big issue that we have right now in the space, which is like these really large spreads between borrowing and lending rates. So, like you can borrow or you can lend and you'll earn, say right now, between 3 and 6%. But the lending, if you're borrowing, you're paying much more than that. And the reason is a lot of these assets are just sitting idle in the pools. So when you construct the interest rate model for any of these projects, you're kind of almost taking a position on what the market interest rate will be, and you want the pool to basically always be completely full, taking into account people's need for liquidity. But as individuals, we can't really figure out exactly where the market will be and how to configure that. So we're trying to get a way to let people more democratically figure into the interest rates and be able to impute their own opinions about the market themselves instead of it being completely governed by the projects and their personal configuration of their interest rate model.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about governance. You guys have a governance model?
Yeah, so we haven't published about it yet, but we are almost finished with what we think governance will look like, and we will be publishing about it like fairly shortly. And also we plan to start implementing it in Q1 2020. Governance is kind of like the final frontier for us in terms of disintermediating ourselves from the protocol. And it's a really tricky problem that I think nobody has really effectively solved. The most that's really been done in terms of governance is probably MakerDAO. And they suffer from like really terrible voter participation, and it's just not clear that the incentives are really aligned. It seems like, like in the last vote that MakerDAO had for the stability fee, it was just one person who held a lot of Maker that essentially controlled the vote. So
yeah,
having just
I think when we talk about governance, I think I was just talking to someone the other day about population control, right? I mean, when Bitcoin is made, it's made, so it is decentralized. However, there's really no control about concentration. So there's validators, there's miner. We care about trust. We care about security. However, if there's one entity that owns all of Bitcoin, then you have that concentration, right? Which is centralization in a different way. And with all these projects, governance is still an issue because I think everyone has different interests. So how do you prevent that? It's almost like a real public company with like shares, right? A lot of these people reportings, you have like over a certain amount, you have to report it to everyone, so there's transparency. With governance, a lot of voting and vote. I guess we have shareholders in the meetings and votes as well in that regard. But I think with the decentralized finance, it's especially really important, interesting as well because it's very nuanced for the digital token space.
Yeah. So in terms of like, dealing with plutocracy in governance structures, it's essentially, it is impossible to prevent plutocracy without identity.
Hmm.
So if you have identity, you can implement schemes like quadratic voting. But without it, you can always be Sybil attacked. You have no real way to tell one person from another, and so it can always appear perfectly democratic when in fact one person could be impersonating thousands. And there's been no solution to identity on the blockchain, and it's kind of consumed a lot of really great minds so far with very little in the way of results. So
I think there's a difference between identity and decentralized identity, right? I mean, in the regard as, of course we all have passports, driver licenses, blood tests, and all kinds of stuff. But in a decentralized environment, we don't really want people to know who we are, or do we have to, because it's trustless and there's minors. So the question is, how do we create decentralized identity?
yeah, in terms of that, I think the best way to think about decentralized identity is sort of like the cost to fake it. So, with a Twitter account, you can buy it for X amount of money. With official government documents, you have to go to like a black market, and it might cost thousands of dollars. Ultimately, I think that whatever solution we arrive at is going to have to leverage the fact that there are states with meat space enforcement that can drive up the cost of faking identity. But decentralized methods of doing it are at a really big disadvantage to drive up the cost. It becomes very difficult to really just do it in a decentralized way that does not take advantage of physical space. So I don't know what the solution to decentralized identity is, but in terms of governance, what I believe the solution is really about trying to maximize voter participation so that plutocracy and just a few actors become far less effective. If you can force near 100% of people to participate by aligning the incentives correctly, it'll be very hard for just a few people to control the voting, given a reasonable distribution of the governance tokens.
True.
And if say one person does end up owning 51% of the tokens, and they're able to just on their own control the voting, that's like a very high bar, and it also very much aligns their incentives with not running the protocol into the ground. So it's a similar concept with Bitcoin with 51% attacks. Like once you are able to get 51% of the hash power, you don't have a very great incentive to run the network into the ground. Like you're so invested in the network at that point that it's not really in your interest to do something malicious. So that's the kind of security model we have to rely on. When you look at something like Maker, where people can go and they can borrow from another platform like ours or Compound, and they can just attack or vote at no cost to themselves. Or you see that like there's actually very little participation, where you only need like say 5% of the tokens in order to get a vote. That's where you really like run into big problems with plutocracy, because you have a lot of people that can just easily swing the vote in their favor, and they're not necessarily as deeply invested into the protocol as you'd like it to be.
Yeah, I think I'm not concerned about being invested or fully or not. I'm more concerned about complacency. I think once we have a lot of concentration, it might turn other people off, right, because of participation and engagement, but it also can create complacency. So maybe there is a balance, but it is a hard challenge to solve because it involves just really different layers of different solutions. And we need to have faith, like you did, that everything will work out.
Well, I think the important thing is implementing some sort of carrot and some sort of stick. in terms of participation, rewards for participation, and some sort of punishment for not participating. And the governance systems that we've seen, like Maker, that have very low participation, they don't have either a carrot or a stick.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the issue. Once you have some incentive mechanisms in place, you can feel a little bit more comfortable that people really will participate and that you're going to be addressing this problem.
Yeah, so how about the challenge of security for DeFi projects? Security, I mean, personally, I find that very fascinating. I think it's very important. How are you guys handling identity is part of that, of course, because fraud, right? Synthetic identity, but also security, making sure that your team is good and all the systems, you have some kind of security measures in place for the company. How are you guys protecting that?
Yeah, so when we first started the project, we were very cognizant that being public as somebody in DeFi would put a target on our back. And this was actually pretty terrifying because it's much easier to attack than it is to defend. It's just a fundamental asymmetry with security. So, you only have to do one thing wrong, make one slip up in order to basically lose everything. So we were really meticulous. We thought about SIM swapping.
Mm-hmm.
We put measures in place to avoid that. We disconnected our cell phone as a recovery method from all of our accounts. We made it so that there had to be physical security keys or one-time passwords. So we made sure, like with Google, with your Gmail, it's really interesting how persistent they will be in adding very sneaky ways of account recovery that you might not necessarily have known
Mm-hmm.
was even there. And you have to really spend a lot of time to make sure that somehow your cell phone can't be used for account recovery.
Yeah.
No,
I think I lost one of my Coinbase account, and I had to basically take a selfie of myself with a face and all that stuff, and it still took me about 2 weeks. And without even authenticator app, and then also text messaging, it just takes a little bit longer.
Yeah. So cell phone based 2FA, security keys, hardware wallets, having these really onerous backup methods. Those are the ways we kind of approach security, and it's definitely a challenge, but we feel pretty comfortable that the way that we've shared accounts, the way we share information is very secure. But yeah, it's a huge challenge, and we've seen projects that have had their Twitter hacked or something like that, and then the next thing the hacker is posting hey, here's a crowd sale, or here's a giveaway, just send us all your money, and we'll make sure you make a lot of money. And then next thing millions of dollars have been sent and lost to some scammer, and that's a huge fear of ours, and we spent a lot of time looking at just every vector we could to protect ourselves and really our customers from something like that.
So it's almost time, and I wanted to ask you, are there any other aspects of the project that you would like to discuss that I haven't asked?
Aspects of the project. I think you've covered most of the big areas. Is there any questions from Twitter or anything like that?
There were a lot of tweets, but there hasn't been any questions yet on Twitter. You guys did a really awesome job tweeting the program, by the way. I see it in front of me. I was actually looking at it all this time, and it's super, super awesome. I wanted to ask you, what's that one advice that you would like to provide to the community?
In terms of being a developer and starting a company like this, or in terms of just the broader community of people who might be interested in getting into DeFi?
Just in general.
Okay, yeah. Generally, if you're looking to get into DeFi, I'd say, start at the best sources that have compiled information, and I'd say like those two are DeFi Prime and DeFi Pulse. DeFi Pulse has a lot of like, if you click on each company, they have summaries of what they're doing. Every project that's listed there is already live, has customers, it's actually doing things that kind of filters out a lot of the noise for you.
Hmm.
I would suggest joining the DeFi Telegram. There's just a lot of really great people in the industry that are already there, and they're super helpful. They love answering questions. And yeah, that'd be like the major things. I would just go to the best resources and join the larger community and start asking questions. And everybody is really eager to help and happy to answer everything that people ask.
Yeah, and we have a question, Mark, on Twitter, and
Okay.
this question for you. Currently, all loans positions within DeFi are over collateralized. Do you think it's possible that in the future you will have an on-chain credit rating reputation which will eliminate this aspect, which is more than 100% collateral?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Mark. So in terms of whether we'll get to under collateralized loans, I think it's definitely possible. It's a really difficult problem, and it's in some ways kind of bound up with identity. But I think that some of the most promising like the promising approaches that I've seen to approaching the most intractable seeming problems have been through mechanism design. So and I'll give like an example of one I really like. It's called escrovery. It's it's a combination of escrow and recovery. But the general idea is that you can set up your account such that you set a threshold for how much needs to be sent, and if nobody comes to claim it, then you get to claim the account. So as a sort of like account recovery mechanism. But if somebody is trying to attack it, they'll pay a substantial cost, and you can simply send a transaction from the account, and once you do, you actually take that money. So it's sort of like a game theory way of setting up a way to recover your account and profit from anyone who tries to attack, and impose a cost on attackers at the same time. So I think that there might be mechanisms to get reputation for under collateralized loans that will sort of rely on maybe a similar mechanism. There's this project named Acropolis where they seem to be attacking reputation and under collateralized loans in a sort of a way that kind of reminded me of this approach, where you're going and you're staking in order to vouch for the reputation of somebody. And, people will be able to have skin in the game that will allow you to, they'll vouch for you and potentially be able to lose their money if they're not right about you being able to repay. And through a process of, doing this repeatedly and earning some measure of trust, you can perhaps, have people stake less, but still be, on the hook for what you're borrowing. So I do think that mechanism design is a really promising avenue, and I'm not sure that anybody has nailed the problem yet, but I am kind of optimistic that there are ways around these really intractable seeming problems. Yeah, so if you want to learn more about bZx, check us out at bZx.network. I really recommend reading our Medium posts. So our Medium posts have all the best information, and also our Twitter at bZeroXnet. So our Twitter has basically everything going on, every update that happens with us. So if you want to learn more, stop in those places or check us out on Telegram. We're very active. We answer any questions that people have. We're always happy to help.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you for
It
your
was great being
time.
on.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye bye.
You have a good one.